Okay, let's get started. First off, I want to thank you all for joining us today for this Tridium Talk on Niagara Tenant Billing Services. I am David Graff. I lead Tridium's professional services as well as the Niagara Developer Program. With me today, we have James Johnson, who leads the U.S. U.S. Sales Engineers and provides invaluable technical and industry knowledge throughout our Vicon channel and beyond. James has supported the Vicon Tenant Billing Services for many years now and has a ton of knowledge on it. By the end of this Tridium Talk today, you should know what Niagara Tenant Billing Services is, the key features and benefits of Niagara Tenant Billing Services, how it's applied and where it's applied, how to get it, and where to find more information on it. Plus, James is going to give us a live look into the various features of Niagara Tenant Billing Services. As with all Tridium Talks, this is being recorded and you will be able to rewatch this at a later date. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to answer them in the chat as this Tridium Talk progresses. Also, we will have time towards the end of this Tridium Talk to answer questions from the chat. If by some chance we run out of time and we don't get to all your questions, we will follow up with the remaining questions after the Tridium Talk. So what is the concept of tenant billing services? Traditionally, tenant billing services has enabled property managers and operators to monitor consumption of utilities such as electric, gas, and water by a tenant operating out of or living in a space as a subsection of a larger building or campus. And then it's enabled operators to bill for that consumption, subject to things like local code, laws, and regulations, and things like that. However, it's not limited to those big three utilities. If you can meter it, or if you can simulate metering it, you can monitor it and you can bill for it using tenant billing services. Niagara Tenant Billing Services, or Niagara TBS, is a Niagara-based product offered by Tridium that empowers property managers and operators to use Niagara to monitor building or tenant utility consumption data, generate and distribute invoices to the tenants based on this consumption, and enhance the process of tracking and billing for utilities. Tridium's professional services has upgraded the original Vicon tenant billing services to be compatible with a Niagara 4.15 supervisor and will be released with Niagara 4.15. With this release, Tridium Professional Services will begin supporting and enhancing the TBS product going forward. Niagara TBS provides the flexibility of customizing rate structures according to their specific needs. It automates the tedious process of generating and delivering invoices, simplifying workflows for operators and owners. And it is globally applicable as it accommodates a wide range of currencies and taxes and surcharges. The key features and benefits of Niagara Tenant Billing Services provides the ability to customize and automate to meet your unique building requirements. You will be able to make your invoices look the way that you want and brand them by adding your logos. And by using Niagara Tenant Billing Services to automatically generate and deliver invoices directly to your tenants, you won't miss sending any invoices. You can import data in to simplify configuration of the Niagara TBS, and you can export tenant billing data out for consumption in other third-party applications. The intuitive, user-friendly design makes setup and training quick and easy, and you can find what you're looking for from past data by searching through invoice histories. And new to this release are enhanced web views created in native Niagara UX, which can be accessed in any browser and any mobile device without Java dependencies. From shopping malls to education facilities, many rely on tenant billing services to handle utility building applications. The target markets shown here are by no means a complete list of where to apply Niagara TBS. They are the key markets that our wide breadth of experience here at Tridium sees Niagara TBS serving well in. When you think about buildings occupied by multiple tenants, from the commercial side, we see multi-unit retail spaces to large commercial real estate buildings. From the residential side, we see Niagara TBS being utilized in multi-tenant condos or apartment complexes. From education, we see multi-unit buildings shared by different departments, as well as multi-building campuses, all with reasons to know how utilities are being consumed by each tenant space, if nothing else, maybe for historical purposes, regardless of the need to invoice. From the medical side, we see TBS being utilized in medical offices buildings that house multiple medical service tenants. I'm sure there's many other applications for Niagara TBS, and we look forward to learning of the various ways the Niagara community applies it beyond these target markets. I wanted to say this one very clear. It's very important to note that Niagara Tenant Billing Services, when Niagara Tenant Billing Services is released with Niagara 4.15, it's going to be available to all Tridium customers. So I'm going to repeat that. When Niagara Tenant Billing Services is released with 4.15, it's going to be available to all Tridium customers through Vicon and all of our OEMs. We are maintaining the model number structure known with the legacy Vicon tenant billing services that begins with a base of 10 tenants for a supervisor, and then with part numbers to add more tenants in quantities of 10, 25, 50, and 100. We also kept the licensing feature consistent with the Vicon TBS, so existing customers of Vicon TBS will be able to upgrade to Niagara 4.15 and the new Niagara TBS and be ready to go. Once this is released with 4.15, to get it, you'll be able to go to Niagara Licensing, click on the software drop-down menu, and select Downloads. Search for Niagara Tenant Billing Services and download it. Now I'm going to hand over control to James to provide a live demo of Niagara Tenant Billing Services. And then when James is done, we'll do a Q&A from the chat, and I'll show you where to find more information before we wrap this up. So James, I'm handing it over to you.
All right. Thanks, David. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. So today I'm going to provide a short demonstration of the Niagara Tenant Billing Service and how to utilize and configure the application. And in this case, I'm running a supervisor with Niagara 4.15 version, and I'll log into my station here in the browser. So first thing to note is in the palette space here, there is a Niagara tenant billing palette, and it does have a single component in it, which is the tenant billing service. And that service does have a few child components to it, but there's really just one component that you would drag into the system, into the station. And that would go under the services in the station is where it should be located. And you'll see here in my station that I have the tenant billing service in the station already. But if I was adding this to a station, I would simply drag and drop or copy and paste from the palette out into the services of the station. And we'll go through and talk about the various pieces, parts here of the tenant billing service. First of all, the way invoices are designed and built is using PX Editor. So there's a complete help topic in the Workbench help, but I'll show you what some of these might look like as examples, and we won't get too far into the weeds on this. But using 4.15, we have the UX Builder, which is the PX Editor in the browser, and you can see that this is really just a report pane, which you might have utilized in previous things that you've done with Niagara for generating different reports and things. So this is sort of like a liquid layout flow, and it can span multiple pages depending on the content that is needed to be displayed in the invoice. And we give some examples along with the software, and these utilize various canvas panes that have different labels and things in them as well. These are all built essentially as a relative PX view. So you'll see relative ords like slot colon, and then some B format syntaxes that might be displaying information related to the owner of the building or the tenant, or specific meters and things that might be on the invoices. So I'm not going to get into any more real details about this on the design, but understand it's up to you to, you start with some examples, but you can design the invoice however you want to, as far as colors, fonts, and information that can be included in there within the constraints of the information that's available, at least. All right, so moving on a little bit, then talk about the basic pieces parts here of the tenant billing service. The first one, which is really straightforward, is this templates. And all the templates are is a way to assign a nice human readable name to this ORD file path to the PX files that you're using for the invoice templates. So it's really simple here. You can just obviously look at the edit, see a name and that mapping, or you can create new mappings as you need to. And we'll see how that comes into play here in just a few minutes. Then we're going to take a look at utilities here. And what utilities are really just containers that allow you to group meters. And those could be grouped by the type of meter, like electric, gas, water, steam, so forth. Or it could be grouping based on a building or a floor, things like that. Really, they just kind of provide some logical grouping to organize the meters in the application. When we take a look at what one of these utilities are, again, it's really essentially a container, but it does have some things like descriptions and physical addresses and things if it actually was mapping to a specific utility company or something like that. When you look under an individual utility, this is where we're going to see the meter manager. And in the tenant billing application, we have two types of meters that you can utilize. There's a flat rate meter and a timed meter. When I take a look at a flat rate meter, what we'll see is things like description, what types of meters it is, and we have some certain static types that you can pick from, or you can type in static text here to identify the meter as a BTU meter or chiller or whatever it might be if it isn't populated in one of the default drop downs. Now, as David mentioned, from the tenant billing perspective, we're looking for a numeric history that's tracking something that can be quantified and charged for based on some consumption. Now, that might be after hours override usage in the building, or it could be kilowatt hours, electrical, or BTUs, or any kind of numeric history. So it could be gallons of water or whatever it might be. But you just need to have a numeric history on something. So it could be an actual meter like a BACnet or a Modbus power meter, or it could be some kind of virtual meter that you're calculating based on pulse inputs to a controller or anything. And in the flat rate meter here, then you're just picking from one of the numeric histories that you want to then identify as a meter in the TBS application. There's some other things here. I'm not going to get into all the details, but these properties configure how the invoice validation is done when invoice is generated. And in this case, with a flat rate meter, it has a utility rate. So in this case, I'm saying I want to charge 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour for all the electrical usage for this meter. We also have the option for a timed meter. And really the only difference with the timed meter is instead of entering a fixed utility rate, you pick from different numeric schedules that are configured under the application. So taking a look under the utilities here, you'll see there's a timed meter schedules group. And this is where you will have one or more numeric schedules that are set up in the system. And these allow you to configure different rates at different times of the day and different days of the week. So if you needed to do some kind of higher charges just after hours, or if you needed to do lower charges on a weekend or vice versa, then you can do all that with a numeric schedule and can charge different rates at different times of day and different days of the week. Right. So once we go through and set up all our meters in the system, then we would be looking at configuring the owners or the buildings in this tenant billing application. And you'll do that on the owner manager view here. You can create new owners or buildings, as I tend to refer to these. And what we'll see is that this owner or building has a name, a physical address, contact name, contact email address, maybe a corporate logo and things like that, which we want to include in the invoices. Email addresses to be able to automatically email invoices to the owner or to the individual tenants. And then you can have one or more owners here, obviously. It could be multiple buildings in a campus or multiple properties that the customer owns and maintains and operates. And then when you drill into the particular building, we'll see that there's a tenant manager view. And on the tenant manager view here, this is where you would configure individual tenants that reside inside of that building space that you have that you want to charge for the utility usage or consumption, whatever it might be. So in this case, very similar to the owner, there's contact information, account numbers, physical addresses, contact information, and so forth. Now, it's important to note here that there are some options here to export out as CSV and import from CSV. So for data entry purposes, you can export a single tenant here and give that spreadsheet to someone else to do all the data entry and then re-import or import that CSV file to then fill out all the account details for tenants and things like that. So that could be helpful if you're migrating from another system as well. Taking a look under each individual tenant, you're going to see one or more contracts, and they could be disabled. And in this case, I have a disabled contract. This is the enabled contract here. And when we take a look at a contract, you'll see that this is where you can configure things like currency. So whatever your local currency is, whether you want to charge taxes, if so, what's your tax rate percentage? Should that tax also apply to these line item fees? And then we have 3 line items, which obviously have some names assigned to them here, but you can assign whatever kind of string or nomenclature to those fees on the actual invoice, but it does allow for 3 arbitrary line items on the contract. And this is goes back to that initial thing I showed about mapping the PX files to a nice name. This is where you would pick the particular PX invoice template that you want to utilize for this contract for this customer. And mind you, they do use relative words, so it's certainly possible to have a single PX invoice template that would apply to all customers, but still have some unique things like the customer's logo and things like that embedded in them. Then at the bottom here, you can see that we can assign different meters to this contract. And this allows me to then pick by the utility. And remember, that could be a grouping based on meters that are in the building or a floor or a particular type of meter. It's really just a container to group. And then you would pick the particular meter that you want to assign to this contract. It is possible to assign the same meter to a contract that multiple contracts, meaning maybe I have 10 tenants in the building and I assign the same meter to the contract for all 10 tenants. And in that case, you would maybe be changing this meter percentage here to say 10% of the meter cost allocation would be assigned to the contract for each of those 10 tenants. So then you can distribute meters that might be monitoring common areas and things like that across multiple contracts, across multiple tenants. Right. So that's the process of going through and assigning or adding an owner, adding tenants under that, and creating contracts under each of those tenants. So once we've gone through that process, we're at a point where we can now generate bills or invoices. And there's a number of ways that you can do that manually. One is by going to the owner manager, and you can select one or more of these owners/buildings, select those, and then click generate invoices. And this will take you through a manual wizard to generate the invoices. And in this case, you could deselect certain contracts and then proceed through with that process. You can also do the same function from the tenant manager view by selecting multiple tenants, clicking generate invoice, and it would again allow you to generate in bulk a number of invoices for multiple tenant contracts at the same time. You can also select an individual customer or tenant, or go into that tenant's contract manager view rather, select one or more contracts and generate the invoice. So the process is the same regardless of where you execute from. It's just a matter of how many invoices am I generating at the same time. In this case, I'll step through the process here, and I might say that I want to generate an invoice for this tenant from 1 January to 1 February. You could enter in an adjustment, like maybe a late charge and a description here if you wanted to. And then you have an opportunity to actually generate a PDF file, and we can select the directory where we want these invoices to be saved. So I might select this invoice folder under the station, and when I generate this invoice, it will not only generate the invoice in the historical records, but it'll also save a PDF file for me. we also have the ability to then send an email with the PDF invoice attachment. And there's some sort of variables that you can use here, like tenant email address or owner email address. And those will go and look up the email contact information from the applicable owner slash tenant and would send the email directly then, assuming you have the email service configured in your station. So that's in this case, I'm not going to actually try to send an email, but I will click finish, and this should go through and generate the invoice for me. So you get a little dialog here indicating the dates that were used and the invoice reference number that was created there. Now, if I look at the invoice folder here, I should see this invoice 385 file that was generated here. And if I look at this PDF file, you can see that it takes that PX, renders it with all the applicable data filled in, things like the start and end dates and number of days, the invoice number, and charges, the company logo, and other information that I might have set up in that invoice itself. And we can certainly regenerate and look at these invoices after the fact. So even if if I deleted this 385 PDF from the file space of the station, there's this invoice group component here. And what this allows me to do is go look at past invoices that have been generated, which are really stored as historical records. And I can go back and view that information. So you can select the tenant and the contracts if there's more than one contract. And then you can see here that I see the invoice 385 that was generated today. And when I select that, it populates here as a PX view in the browser. And then we can export this out as a PDF at this point, and it would regenerate a PDF file so that I could then print or mail that invoice as needed. So the invoice manager view allows us to go review the past invoices, regenerate the PDFs, and that sort of thing as needed. The other thing that we have along with this tenant billing application is the auto billing profiles. And you can set up one or more auto billing profiles. There's a default automatic billing profile that will be in the application by default, hence the name. And when you take a look at the billing profile, um, this is designed to either set to no schedule, meaning I want to do manual billing all the time, or you could say that you want to bill monthly, and it could be on the last weekday, and you can pick which day of the week, or you can pick a specific day of the month here, or you could use custom, which would allow you to use a trigger schedule, and you could set something like the third Tuesday of the month, or every other month, or bi-weekly, or whatever you wanted to do to generate invoices. So it allows you to configure either manual or automatic generation. Very similar to the manual invoicing process, you would be setting a start date, saying, hey, once this is enabled, when do I want the next invoice to be generated? So I could say, on 1 February, I want it to generate an invoice, and it'll look at the past dates, and it'll just each month it will generate a new monthly invoice with the previous information. And it's very similar to the manual process. You can save these invoices to PDF, and you can also send emails as well with those PDF attachments as well. Right now, when you take a look at the owners, then glossed over this earlier, but when you look at the owner has a billing profile that you can select then. So that allows you to bill all tenants in that building using the same automatic billing profile, if that's what you would like to do. And you can also go into the details on individual tenants, and they have a billing profile property which defaults to using or inheriting the owner's billing profile, but you can deselect that and then assign each tenant a different billing profile. So if for some reason maybe you needed to bill tenants based on their tenant lease date, as opposed to the first of the month or something along those lines, then that allows you to set up each individual tenant in the building to be billed at different frequencies with the automatic billing if needed. Right? So there's definitely some more things that we can get into the weeds on, but that is the high level demo of the application. It does store information as historical data, and David mentioned in the sort of PowerPoint slides that you can then export that historical information as well out to some other applications to consume the consumption and invoice data instead of it just being in a PDF format. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things back over to David, I guess, at this point. David, you're still on mute. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, James. Okay, so we have a few questions here in the Q&A chat, and I see a couple more rolling in. One of the questions well, there's a couple similar questions that I answered already, but for the sake of the group, I'll paraphrase them and repeat them. The group was asking about specific global regions. Is it going to be available? So our intent with this product is to make it available globally. However, I do encourage you to check with your Tridium sales personnel, and pro services can also help to ensure it's appropriate for your local region. Some local regions have different metering and billing rules and regulations. So it's something we'll definitely, based on the region, want to make sure that there's no rules and regulations that prevent you from doing some metering and billing, but we are intending to make this globally available. Okay. So another question is, are PX templates that were shown available within the module? There are some templates that do come with the module and are available, and you can also customize the templates and make them more like your own. So add your logo and stuff like that. Okay, this one I'm going to lean on James here. So is there a meter number field available for buildings that have multiple meters with the utility meter number listed that need to be shown on the tenant invoice? So James, is that field available where you can specify meters if there's multiple meters on an invoice?
You can have a breakout of individual meters on. So if you had multiple electric meters, then you can design the PX invoice where it would show rows or line items for each of those individual meters. And you have control over what you name those meters as well as descriptions. So there's a name for the meter and also a description. So all that information can be included in the invoice as well.
Okay. Okay, and then there's a question here. Is this a service that's purchased through licenses, or is it free? Yeah, you buy the licenses. And I showed how it breaks down a few slides ago where you buy the main supervisor license. That gets you 10 tenants, and then you can purchase more in increments of 10, 25, 50, and 100. And so these are purchasable licenses, and you add them to supervisors. So these are specific for supervisors.
Yeah, so there was a question about using bidirectional electric meters, in particular with solar. So there's I didn't really get into details on them, but there are some sort of validation properties on each meter. And one of those is to allow negative usage. So when configured that way, it does allow the bidirectional usage on that meter then.
Okay. All right. And then James, is there an option to get a spreadsheet report with a summary of the info invoice generated by month?
What was it? Say that again, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah, is there an option to export like a spreadsheet report with summary of the info generated on invoices by month? So can
Uh,
we export out that data by month?
Yeah, all that information for each tenant, there's individual histories that store information about the invoices on their contracts that have been generated. So you could certainly set up history exports using a file driver or relational database driver or generating some kind of like an export source report. Short answer is yes. I think the devil's in the details and what you're actually trying to export to.
Okay.
What other? I'm trying to type in answers on some of these questions here as we're going along, but
Yeah, and I'm scrolling down through them to figure out which ones to call out for you, James, as well.
yeah. So there's a question about how do you configure the tenant billing service to know which historical data trend to pull from. So that's under each meter that you configure. It has a history identifier, and that allows you to select a specific history from the station that you want to use for that meter and tenant billing.
And James, there's a question on basically how the license counts. So, if you have 10 tenants and a supervisor and you bought the base license, can you elaborate on how that's going to count?
Yeah, so we do not, we're not concerned with the number of meters or points in the system or how often you want to generate an invoice. The only license constraint is the number of active tenants. And I say active tenants because in a case with, multi-tenant real estate or whatever, you have tenants move out periodically and you don't necessarily want to delete that tenant information. You can disable it and then add another tenant. So we're looking at how many enabled tenants are in the application.
Okay. All right. And then at the moment, are we restricted to a single page PDF invoice?
No, that's the reason why we use the report pane in particular. Now, I mean, you could certainly design it with a fixed single page, but part of the benefit of the report pane is the fact that it spans pages. It supports that pagination functionality.
Here's a question that I'm sure is a favorite of everybody's. Is an active SMA required to use TBS?
No. So there's nothing tied with SMA to TBS. The only thing would be if in the future, new features and functionality were added, then it may require, updating to a new version. 415 is planned to be the LTS, version for Niagara for Niagara 4. So I wouldn't see that being an issue at all. But no, it's not tied to SMA. There's no recurring costs associated with it.
Okay. All right. And if a customer were to have multiple meters on a building that has multiple customers in the same building, at this time, they charge on their percentage of building. Can I set that up in the customer file? I tried to paraphrase that one for you, James, but I don't know that I did it well.
So is is that the
This is the one from Jeannie Below, where it says
okay?
I have a few real odd situations.
Multiple meters on a building that has multiple customers in the same building. This time we charge on their percentage of building. So, if I understand the question correctly, I think is it sounds like the what I was describing about split meters across tenants, where maybe they're trying to just charge each tenant a percentage based on their floor space that they lease in the building. So if that's the question, then the answer is yes. The meters on each contract can be assigned a percentage that might be based upon the leased floor space or whatever equal percentage you wanted to charge.
Okay. Right. And is there a way to include some kind of meter identification or something that ties the invoice back to specific hardware or piece of hardware?
Metadata, I guess. Like I said, there's a description, there's a name and a description on the meter. So I would say that probably some kind of metadata from that standpoint based on the question.
All right, James, I know I've been hitting you with a lot here. With just a minute or two left, are there any questions that you saw that you wanted to get to live here?
Yeah, we're just trying to read through here real quick. Meter, not large. So we don't run, there's a question about running TBS inside of a Jace instead of a server. Uh, the it's a it's really a business decision. At this point, we only allow it to be run on a supervisor, and really the reason for that is we feel that a tenant might come back and want to dispute an invoice, and it might be 6 months later or something. And where a Jace, is Jace 9 has like better historical data storage, obviously bigger flash drives and things like that. But still, you probably want to have a longer retention of the data that went into calculating that invoice. It's to support that if it needs to be disputed or things like that. So we only allow it to be licensed on a supervisor for that main reason.
Okay. And James, we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in the presentation, but do you want to give your insight onto what's changed from the original Vicon TBS and what's coming in 415 with the Niagara TBS?
Yeah, so the predominant change is there's really a couple things, I guess, and we've been actively maintaining this application since the mid AX days, to be honest with you, and it was migrated to N4, and so this has been around for quite some time. Has had enhancements and bug fixes over the years, and is current with the current 414 release and 410 U10, obviously with the LTS. With 415, the management of this is shifting over to a different engineering team, and we've updated this to have all HTML based interfaces, right? And where previously it was all Java based and required Workbench or Niagara Web Launcher to do the visualization. So with 415, we've updated and refreshed the UI, and it's all HTML based, which was why I was demonstrating all this through the browser as opposed to using Workbench, trying to emphasize that it's all browser-based configuration and usage. And then also widening the distribution of the product through professional services through Tridium. So it's available to any OEM channel and any customer. And then going forward, then it's kind of up to things that may, more features might creep in and things like that.
Okay. There's a ton of great questions and they keep rolling in. We are running out of time. We will have all of these questions. We will be able to answer them as follow-up. And as I'm saying this, I keep seeing more and more roll in. So, James, I want to thank you for helping with these questions. Lots of great stuff. I love seeing the interest on this product that is coming out in 415. Okay, so real quick, where to get more information. So in case you didn't know, Tridium Professional Services actually has their own webpage found on Tridium's website. And Tridium Professional Services offers several products with TBS included in that. So I would encourage you to go to tridium.com, click on services and support, and click on professional services. Review our offering. Look at what we offer through the web page, and then scroll down to the bottom, and you're going to find a lot of resources such as our brochure, data sheets, excuse me, and Tridium Talks. So this Tridium Talk will be uploaded there once we finish this and it gets its final editing. You can also find a link to Tridium Talks directly on Tridium's homepage, and this Tridium Talk will be there as well. So you'll be able to find it on Tridium Pro Services webpage, but also on the Tridium Talk page as well. Once again, I want to thank James for joining us and providing a demo of Niagara TBS and all of the other insight and answering questions. Be on the lookout for Niagara Tenant Billing Services. Again, it's releasing with Niagara 415. So as soon as Niagara 415 is available, so will Niagara Tenant Billing Services. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, James.